With us here on the Tuesday edition of the South African Morning, let's talk money. Let's talk lots and lots of money. Billions of rand will be spent getting flood-hit parts of KZN back to some sort of normality. We're not even talking timelines here yet, just the money. And of course, it's going to be used to help thousands of those who lost their homes. Now, there's no question that it is desperately needed. The question has to be, though, where is that money going to come from? Let's speak to a political economist from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Patrick Bond. Professor Bond, good to have you with us. And as I said, no one's arguing this money is needed, without a doubt. But it is an economic principle I remember studying actually at the University of Johannesburg called TANSTAFL. It's an acronym. It stands for There is no such thing as a free lunch. Good morning.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Gareth. And particularly because this money, unlike a lot of the other spending in the state, will go to the base. It'll go to sites of construction where there are multipliers. So you're right, TANSTAFL, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But if you invest well, this money could have a greater impact up and down the economy for the desperately poor people who need jobs in public works, for the construction industry, which needs a boost, and maybe to actually rebuild a city like Durban in a much more coherent way without such, let's say, vulnerable settlements on hills and in floodplains, and with businesses maybe reorienting to meeting local needs, because, you know, the vulnerability of an export-oriented economy is once again revealed with the shutdown of the port because of this, and because we expect many more such awful rain bombs, they're called, right, where extreme weather events with climate change. And that means no such thing as a free lunch. Who should pay for that lunch? I think some of us, myself included, who have a climate debt, we have a large carbon footprint, and we should be taking a larger burden of what the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change calls loss and damage costs, of which what we've just seen, maybe over 10 billion rand, certainly is coming due now.
And here's what worries me, Prof. You've raised two very good points. One is climate change is a reality. It's not going anywhere. This is going to happen again, hopefully not to KZN in too near the future, but it is going to happen again. The money you're talking about now, apart from getting the money to just repair what has been damaged, how politically and economically, this is why I wanted to talk to you, do we use the money to prevent disasters having this much impact going forward? We can't just get 6 billion rand and just keep repeating the same mistakes. We have to try and improve, don't we?
Well, that's right. And as the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Zikalala, said yesterday, just on the roads alone in the province, 5.6 billion, and that doesn't cover 13,000 houses that need structural repairs. All of the damages, including the, let's say, priceless effect of losing a loved one, where there may be now 500 deaths associated with this extreme weather event. These can be costed roughly, and now whether the Treasury, Enoch Godongwana as finance minister, is able to come up with that much money to support a very urgent rebuilding is a question, because in 2019, a similar rain bomb, 168 millimeters at peak, compared to about 310 millimeters in a 24-hour period last Monday. That then had a very disappointing impact, because the promised amount, even when President Ramaphosa visited and said this is climate change, the promised amount was far short. I estimate about 14% of the damage that needed to be repaired for housing. Even the municipality estimated 663 million rand in damages, and the Treasury only came up with 90 million in these compensations, let's say reparations for the climate damage, a climate debt, if you will, that the society really owes for not having addressed our own very high contribution to the climate crisis. But you know, Gareth, this is coming up as a major global issue. Africa will once again, like in 2011 in Durban, host the United Nations Climate Summit. That'll be in November. It'll be in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And the African delegates, I know, because I work quite closely with advocacy groups, they're very much about pushing loss and damage. And here we have an exemplary case where the people least responsible, with the lowest carbon footprints in South Africa, those are the shack dwellers, those who are just desperately clinging to the sides of hills or putting their shacks on the sides of rivers. They didn't do the damage that causes climate change. Their emission levels are relatively low. It's people like, well, frankly, you and me, and the big corporates, the big minerals energy complex that really should be paying this climate debt.
Prof, I'm going to ask you as well, just something else I remember from economics many years ago. A lecturer of mine always used the analogy and the visualization of a low-hanging fruit tree. We have filled up our basket. It is overflowing with fruit, but we need to get more fruit from elsewhere. So we go for the low-hanging fruit. If we're moving at 5.6 billion for the roads, at least 1.8 billion for housing, restructuring and food, where is that money come from? Where else are we going to lose in order to gain in this flood relief budget, do you think?
Well, this is very interesting because, South Africa's had a very, let's say, intense debate about whether Treasury can spend more without risking the so-called fiscal cliff. And roughly a year ago, before they rebased the GDP, they changed the counting system. It looked like we were going for a very high public debt to GDP ratio, over 80%. Once it was rejigged and more revenues came in because of the rise in commodity prices, well, it turns out we're only at about 70%. So there is fiscal space. There isn't like that extreme pressure that the credit rating agencies and others would put on Finance Minister Godongwana. But the other question that we have to raise is if you can trust government to actually spend this money without corruption. This is what Sikhle Zikalala very frankly said yesterday. Please trust us this time. We know you were wrong to trust us, he very openly said, on the COVID-19 emergency relief. And one of the ways to do that, a more trustworthy way to spend the money, is by increasing the social grants to those who live in that area. This is a sort of climate debt via basic income grant strategy that's been discussed. But secondly, there are civil society groups who are trusted. And the most important, I think we all know, Gift of the Givers, the Islamic-based relief agency, which works all over the world and has a sterling record. Another that represents the victims in many of the communities, especially the hilly areas, Kennedy Road, Foreman Road, and others, is Abashlali Bastam Jandolo, and they have accounts to provide a basic relief that many in civil society are going directly to, instead of to a KZN government, which, last Sunday, for the leadership of Durban, elected from the ANC delegates, the new head of that Durban region, whose name is Zandile Gumedi, the former mayor who was arrested in 2019 and had to leave office after more than 2,000 counts of corruption were lodged against her, and her prosecution is underway. So this is really a kind of statement by the ANC Durban delegates that, well, maybe we can't really trust the ruling party. And it is disturbing that she and her new leadership, again elected just the day before this rain bomb hit, have now tried to take control as a sort of so-called nerve center for relief. So this is a concern, isn't it?
It's a massive concern. This is, I think, what is the discussion the country is having. I don't think anyone, Prof, as I say goodbye to you, is doubting this money is needed. But I think most South Africans, based on social media, based on the interviews we've done, are saying we don't trust the government to handle this. Give it to somebody else, and we will all make donations. But, Prof, I really appreciate your time in stepping outside on a very cold morning in Johannesburg. It's always good to have a political economist from University of Johannesburg, Professor Patrick Bond, joining us, just helping us understand where this exorbitant amount of money is coming from. It's got to come from somewhere else. The question was who exactly was going to lose out. It's no such thing as a free lunch. We're heading up